So we are approaching the end of Book 10, the Book of the Double Twilight. We've been following this long debate between Savitri and Death through Book 9, through the 4 cantos of Book 10. Death again, after Savitri has given a wonderful outline of the higher planes of existence, explained about the truth of evolution, and she's told him, "Who can show to you truth's glorious face?" And she said, if you could grow suddenly wise and see the truth, then you would cease to be. You couldn't continue in your present form. No? So he challenges her yet again. First of all, he asks her, "Who are you? You are hiding in this human disguise. But your voice has authority. It seems to be carrying even the sound of infinity. Knowledge is with you. Truth speaks through thy words. But you've got all these high qualities, all this high knowledge, but where is thy strength to conquer time and death? Have you got the force, God's force, to build heaven's values here on earth?" No? He says, "By power, not light, the great gods rule the world. Reveal thy power, and then I will give back to thee Shraddhavan. Or, if the source of your power is the mighty mother, the supreme mother, if she is with you, let me see her. Show me her face." So we did read the first few lines of the next section, but I'm going to start again at the break. At the break on page 664. And Savitri looked on Death and answered not. Almost it seemed as if in his symbol shape the world's darkness had consented to heaven light, and God needed no more the inconscience scream. So death has changed. And on Savitri, a mighty transformation came on her. A halo of the indwelling deity, the immortal's luster that had lit her face and tinted its radiance in her body's house, overflowing, made the air a luminous sea. In a flaming moment of apocalypse, the incarnation thrust aside its veil. A little figure in infinity yet stood and seemed the eternal's very house, as if the world's center was her very soul, and all wide space was but its outer robe. He has challenged Savitri, and her divinity is revealed. This mighty change comes upon her. She's still just a little figure and yet the whole universe seems to be centered on her. So the description continues. A curve of the calm altar of far heaven, descending into earth's humility, her forehead's span vaulted the omniscient's gaze. Her eyes were two stars that watched the universe. The power that from her being's summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's Lord in his control room sits. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with a golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the Eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal's will. It stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. Her life sounded with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. As glides God's Son into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life-nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the thousand-hooded serpent force that blazing towered and clasped the world self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power. Thus changed, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. So we'll start to read from line 857, at the top of page 665. You will begin, Rosa? Auteur.
Of Clark 7 is descending into Earth's humidity. Here, foreheads span, vaulted their omniscient gaze. Her eyes were two stars that watched the universe.
Yes. So this is describing Savitri's appearance now as she has undergone this transformation. And Sri Aurobindo starts, as he often does, with the brow, the forehead. He says that her forehead, her brow, is like a curve of the calm hauteur of far heaven descending into earth's humility. So it's as if her brow, her forehead, is a kind of bridge between heaven and earth. Something in her brow, in the curve of her brow, expresses that. Hauteur is, I think I can say, nobility. What would you say, Joanne? Hauteur. It's an awareness of nobility. So heaven is high above and looks down on things. But in Savitri there's both. There's that kind of higher presence, great nobility, and at the same time the humility of, which is one of the very beautiful characteristics of sincere human beings. There's some photographs, early photographs of the mother, particularly when she was in Japan, where we have this look of humility. So Savitri is uniting these two characteristics. And this span, the width of her forehead, is vaulting as if it's a roof or a canopy above the omniscient's gaze. Looking out from her eyes is the all-knowing, the divine who has all knowledge. And so her eyes shine like two stars that are watching the whole universe. That's the first part of the description. Gumsun?
Yes. The power that God has used to submit
Reigned. Silent G.
The presence channeled in lotus security came down and held the center in a flow, where the mind's role in his control room's seat. This throne on concentration's native seat. He opens that sudden mysterious eye in man. The unseen's eye that looks at the unseen. When light with the golden ecstasy pierces his brain, and the eternal wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will sees the Mukta's will.
Yes. So in what follows, we're going to get a description of how the power that rules on the summit, on the highest peak of Savitri's being, comes down and takes possession of that little figure, that little human figure, step by step. We've read a description like this before in Book 7, Canto 5, after the finding of the soul. In the last section of that canto, it's described how Savitri, having discovered her soul, her individual soul, and having become aware of her central being, invokes the presence of the Supreme Divine Mother. And the Mother comes down and all the chakras are opened.
And we are transformed also. The human qualities are transformed into the divine qualities. That also.
Yes. So that was a realization which she had then. Now this realization is expressing itself once more in response to this challenge of death. Now, if the mighty Mother is with you, then let me see her, and show me your power. So she doesn't answer him, but that power, which is her highest power, comes and one by one takes possession of the centers. So it starts here, the center in her brow. He says, where the mind's Lord, the ruler of the mind, sits in his control room, controlling whatever's going on in the rest of the being. And that is the native seat of concentration, the natural point of concentration. And when the mind's Lord is there and he concentrates, he can open up the third eye, that third mysterious eye in man. It's supposed to be this center here, no? That's the unseen's eye, the eye of the invisible divine. And it looks at the unseen, into the subtle worlds, no? And with this experience, Sri Aurobindo says, when that eye opens up, when this realization happens, then light fills the brain with golden ecstasy. It's very interesting the way that what we read here in this class often parallels what we are reading in the Life Divine. And I think it was not yesterday but the week before we read from Sri Aurobindo about how the spiritual light, in that context he said that light is not primarily a physical phenomenon. It's the natural expression of spiritual consciousness, is light. So when that spiritual light comes into the physical brain, it fills it with a golden ecstasy. Sri Aurobindo has written a sonnet about this. Thy golden light came down into my head. Yeah. And that means that he's being taken possession of by the eternal. So his choosing, this is our center of will, where we also make choices, no? Then his choice, the choice of the human individual, is being driven by the eternal's wisdom. And his will is being seized by the eternal will. Then the individual becomes an instrument of the Supreme. So that is what is happening to Savitri now. And then next, Mihong.
It starts in the lotus of her throat of stone, and in her speech throughout the immortal word, a life sounded with the steps of the world's soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought.
So here is the lotus of the throat, and this is where our higher life levels meet with the mind levels. It's where we express our consciousness in all the, not only in speech but in any kind of creativity, comes from here. So that power from her being summit, it comes here, and it stirred, it moved there in the lotus of her throat of song. It makes us, reminds us how musical is the speech of Savitri. And that gives her power of speech, the power to express the immortal word, the word of creation. And the effect of this presence in the throat center means that her life, he says, sounded with, means moved in harmony, danced or sang in harmony with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought, the universal thought. Martin.
As Christ God's Son into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the thought that almost faith.
So it proceeds further to the heart center. Here Sri Aurobindo gives a very interesting simile. We've heard this story of the rays of divine light, the rays of the divine sun, the cows of the sun god, how they get hidden in a cave of darkness and they have to be rescued from there. But here he's describing it as if God's Son voluntarily hides itself in the darkness, gliding into that mystic cave to hide his light from the pursuing gods, as if the cosmic powers want to get hold of that light, and he's hiding it from them. So in a similar way, this great presence moves, glides into Savitri's heart center, and there it wakes up in her the force, the tremendous power that can alter fate. What can alter fate? Only the power of the Supreme. So this now she's carrying in her heart. Narendra.
It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire of pure celestial fame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the 1,000 hooded serpent foes that blazing towered and clasps the world self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the Spirit's silent power.
Yes. So it goes down into the navel lotus depth, which is where we have all our relationships with the world around us, with people, with things, the center of the senses. And below that, there's even the little life nature's home, narrow home. And when this is transformed, then the body, the physical longings blossom and grow. Heaven rapture's flower. This gets changed so that even desire becomes a pure celestial flame, a heavenly flame of aspiration and energy. And then it goes into the bottom center, the base of the spine. There's a cave also, and that's where the world energy, the Kundalini, is coiled up where it sleeps. No? When that presence of the Supreme Divine Mother comes down into that lowest center, then that 1,000-hooded serpent force, it wakes up. It's violently woken up, and like a blazing flame, it rises up and up and up and up, and here above the head it embraces the world self above. So in this way, that column of energy joins all the dumbness, not only the silence, but the unresponsiveness, the inertia of matter, to the hush, the wonderful conscious silence of the spirit above. No? And that fills Earth's acts, Savitri's material actions, with the spirit's silent power. So this completes this mighty transformation that came on Savitri in answer to this challenge of death. Yes, Naren?
We don't consider top chakra, Sahasrara chakra.
He has not mentioned it here.
Elsewhere he has mentioned. Elsewhere?
Yes. He has not mentioned all the chakras here, no? This one, the crown, but that is where the Kundalini meets the world soul. Yes. Is that okay, Narendra?
First he says it's already descended to the forehead.
No, this is before.
860.
Oh, yes.
859 it says it has been on the forehead.
First, he doesn't say that. He describes her forehead.
At the bridge,
Yes. It just says about the calm hauteur of far heaven descending into earth's humility. Her forehead span, her eyes. But then he mentions this power that is ruling her from the summit of her being, which is chambered. It has its chamber of lotus secrecy. That can be this crown chakra, which is actually not in the head, but above. No? Dhanalakshmi.
Just chant waited for the Lord to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw source giving judgment. Then the voice was heard that seemed to the stillness felt, or the low calm utterance of infinity. Then it speaks to the silence in the heart of the spirit.
Yes. So Savitri doesn't speak. She waits for the word, the power of the word to speak. And there's this moment when they look at each other. He had said, let deathless eyes look into the eyes of death. So that's exactly what happens. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and that darkness which death represents saw. He has to see. He can't help seeing God's living reality. And then a voice was heard. We're not told that it's Savitri's voice. The voice of the Supreme Divine Mother speaks through Savitri. This voice, it sounds like the stillness, the supreme silence itself, or the low, calm utterance of infinity when it speaks to the silence in the heart of sleep. If we are in trance and we hear the voice of the Supreme, the Transcendent, it sounds something like that, not like a voice that's produced in a human body. So what does the voice say? Bhuvana, you would read, please.
I hail thee, Almighty and victorious death, thou grandest darkness of the infinite. O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnaws at the universe, consuming the whole remnants of the sun, and eatest the whole world with thy jaw of fire, wasted of the energy that has made the stars, in conscience carried of the seeds of thought, machines in which all knowledge sleeps entombed, and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, bearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance. Thou art my shadow and my instrument.
Thank you. So she hails him. Yes, I greet you respectfully. You are almighty and victorious death. And so what does that mean? The voice makes this clear. She says, you grandiose, you're on a superhuman, majestic scale. You are the darkness of the infinite. And you are the emptiness, the nothingness, the void that makes room for everything to exist. She says, you are like an insatiable hunger, a hunger that can never be satisfied, that's chewing away, gnawing, chewing. You gnaw at bones, perhaps. Gnawing at the universe, consuming, taking into yourself the cold remnants of the suns when they've burned themselves out. There's just some waste atoms. You take all that into yourself and you eat up the whole world with your jaws, your powerful jaws of fire. You eat up everything. You are the waster of the energy that has made the stars. This is what the physicists call entropy. It uses up all the energy, levels everything out. So there have been stars, but they will run down You are the one who is eating them all up. You are inconscious, without consciousness. But that inconscience, which seems so dark and so empty and so nothing, she says, carrier of the seeds of thought. So within the inconscious, the possibility, the potentiality of thought is carried there. You are the not knowing, the nescience in which all knowledge is sleeping as if in a tomb, as if it is dead. But it slowly emerges in its hollow breast, in the hollow breast of nescience, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance. It's a kind of disguise of the all-knowledge. You are my shadow and my instrument. You have to do what I make you do. Joel.
I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light, from the brevity of his half-conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip for his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live death a while, be still my instrument.
Thank you. So who has given him this dreadful, terrifying shape of darkness? Who has given him his sharp sword of terror and grief and pain? All the feelings, the negative feelings that we have about death. You exist and you inspire all these feelings because the soul of man needs that spur to force him to struggle for light, for consciousness. More light on the brevity, the shortness of his half-conscious days. We don't have so many days, no? So you, death, are his spur. A spur is a sharp metal piece that horsemen wear on the heels of their boots so that they can drive it into the side of the horse to make it go faster when they want it to go fast. So a spur it makes you go faster. So you, death, the awareness that death is behind us, this makes us want to achieve greatness in our works. And this is like somebody whipping us, stimulating our yearning, our longing for eternal bliss, our poignant need of immortality. We need the contrast of death to make us feel that poignant need of the immortal state. So she says to him, live death a while. I'm not asking you to disappear and dissolve yourself now. You must remain. You will still be my instrument. I will still need you. So I think we'll stop there for today. A curve of the calm altar of far heaven, descending into earth's humility, her forehead span vaulted the omniscient's gaze. Her eyes were two stars that watched the universe. The power that from her being's summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's Lord in his control room sits. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with a golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the Eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal's will. It stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. Her life sounded with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. As glides God's Son into the mystic cave where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life-nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the 1,000-hooded serpent force that, blazing, towered and clasped the world's self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power. Thus changed, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. Then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness self, or the low, calm utterance of infinity when it speaks to the silence in the heart of sleep. I hail thee, almighty and victorious death, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite. O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eats the whole world with thy jaws of fire, waster of the energy that has made the stars, inconscience, carrier of the seeds of thought, nescience in which all knowledge sleeps entombed and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance. Thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half-conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while, be still my instrument.